District administration in India is largely a British creation, like the railways in the English language, another complex and unwieldy bequest of the Raj. But Indianization of a method of administration or of a language is integral to the Indian story. Before 1947, the collector was almost inaccessible to the people. Now he keeps open house primarily because he does a different, more difficult job. He is as human and as fallible, but now others can tell him so, even though he still exhibits the old accoutrements, but now Indianized of importance. The flashing orange light on the roof of the car that passes for the first row at the sitar recital, which will not start until he arrives, and for which he will not arrive until he has ensured by telephone that everyone else who had been invited has arrived first. In Madna, as in all of India, one's importance as an official could be gauged by how long one could keep a concert to which one was invited, waiting. The organizers never minded this of the officials they invited. Perhaps they expected it of them, which was sickening, or perhaps they were humoring them, which was somehow worse. An administration is an intricate business, and a young officer who lacks initiative cannot really be trained in its artifices. There is very little that he can learn from watching someone else. Agastya learned nothing. For a very short while he worried about his ignorance, and then decided to worry about it properly when others discovered it. The collector of the Madna was one building among many in a vast field which could not be called a compound, for it had no wall or gate. Near the railway station. He had missed them all in the dark of the previous evening. The jeep inched its way through people and cattle on to an untarred metalled road. He saw a few flags against the hot, clean sky. The national flag, he presumed, was over the collectorate. What are the other buildings? That's the office of the superintendent of police, sir, said the Naib Tehsildar from behind. And over there are the police lines. Whatever they are, thought Agastya. That's the district and sessions court, and behind there, that big one, the district council. You mean on which there's also the national flag? Sir. And then that side, behind the offices of the subdivisional officer, Tehsildar, etc. While the Naib Tehsildar was pointing out the buildings, the driver nearly ran over a child defecating beside the road and snarled at her in the vernacular. On their left was some kind of pond, with thick green water and the heads of contented buffalo. Scores of people sitting on their haunches, smoking, wandering, gazing at anything moving or at other people. Most were in white dhoti, kurta, and Gandhi cap, or was it Nehru cap, wondered Agastya. No, Gandhi cap and Nehru jacket, or Gandhi jacket and Nehru cap, and Patel vest, and Mountbatten lungi and Rajaji shawl, and Tagore dhoti. Some had towels over their heads. The jeep chugged through them, honking petulantly. The people sitting on the road stood up and moved away at the last moment reluctantly. Some scowled. For them, the road was the one stretch that the rains of Madna wouldn't immediately turn to mud. Therefore, it was a place of assemblage. They cover their heads because of the heat, no? Yes, sir. It seemed wise to bother not about appearance, but first about health. He tried his handkerchief over his head, but it was too small. The Naib Tehsildar chuckled appreciatively. Too small, sir. Napkins easily available in the market, sir. If sir wants, I'll get one. Yes, thanks. Please do that. How much will it cost? Not to worry about price, sir. Rubbish, said Agastya, and offered him a 20-rupee note. The Naib Tehsildar raised his hands to ward off the horror. No, sir, not to bother, sir. Hardly must, sir. Agastya was momentarily distracted by the hardly must. What could he mean? He reached over and, ignoring the Naib Tehsildar's giggles and soft shrieks, put the note in his shirt pocket among the spectacle case, papers, and pens. In all those months, he never got used to the crowds outside the offices. All these people have work here? Yes, sir, said the Naib Tehsildar, a little surprised, perhaps at the stupidity of the question. They all looked patient, as though waiting for entrance to the political rally of some awesome demagogue, Nehru perhaps, or one of his descendants. To him, they also looked stoned. Their eyes were glazed, probably with waiting, and followed every movement around them without curiosity. Just near the collectorate, he saw cannabis growing wild. That was nice, and he smiled somehow, symbolic. He would have to return alone one evening. The collectorate was a one-story stone building. Its corridors had benches and more people. The Naib Tehsildar led him to a biggish hall full of mostly unoccupied desks and through another door. A fat officious man said, "Yes." The Naib Tehsildar mumbled something and the officious man immediately turned servile. "Good morning, sir." "Collector Saab, not yet come, sir." "Myself, Chidambaram, breeder to collector. Kindly accompany me to RDC's room, sir." They moved through another door and down a central corridor, also crowded with people, benches, and water coolers. Another door with C.K. Joshi, RDC, above it. There were 3 men inside. Chidambaram mumbled something. They all stood and shook hands. The 2 younger ones called him sir. All introduced themselves. Agastya didn't catch a single name and didn't bother. Thank God for marijuana, he thought. Formal, pleasant conversation. Someone brought in thick, sweet tea, which the others drank from their saucers. After some low, haphazard guesswork, he decided that the man on his right was Ahmed. Joshi was, or should be, the old jovial man behind the desk. On his right was what had sounded like Agarwal. Ahmed was immediately obnoxious, with blank eyes and a false smile. He never listened when anyone else was speaking, but always looked down at his thick forearms and flexed them. Both Ahmed and Agarwal were deputy collectors, direct recruit, sir. Whatever that was, thought Agastya, but nodded with what he hoped was appropriate awe. He eventually got to know, but by accident as it were, what a deputy collector, direct recruit was, and where a Naib Tehsildar stood in the revenue hierarchy. He himself made no effort to know his new world. As it unfolded, it looked less interesting to him, and later, even to see how far he could extend his ignorance became an obscure and perverse challenge. Sitting with the 3 men, he was again assailed by a sense of the unreal. I don't look like a bureaucrat. What am I doing here? I should have been a photographer or a maker of ad films. Something like that, shallow and urban. How old are you, sir? 28. Agastya was 24, but he was in a lion mood. He also disliked their faces. Are you married, sir? Again, that demand that he classify himself. Ahmed leaned forward for each question, neck tensed and head angled with politeness. Yes. He wondered for a second whether he should add, twice. And your Mrs., sir? Agarwal's voice dropped at Mrs. In all those months, all references to wives were in hushed, almost embarrassed tones. Agastya never knew why. Perhaps because to have a wife meant that one was fucking, which was a dirty thing. She's in England. She's English. Anyway, but she's gone there for a cancer operation. She has cancer of the breast. He had an almost uncontrollable impulse to spread out his fingers to show the size of the tumor and then the size of the breast, but he decided to save that for later. Later in his training, he told the district inspector of land records that his wife was a Norwegian Muslim. He went on like this, careless with details. His parents were in Antarctica, members of the first Indian expedition. Yes, even his mother, she had a PhD in oceanography from the Sorbonne. After a while, the personal questions stopped. Later, he felt guilty, but only for a very brief while. Chidambaram poked his head in and said that the collector had come. Joshi accompanied Agastya. Shrivastava was short and fat and shouting at someone standing in front of him when they entered. He asked them to sit down and continued shouting. If you can tick off a subordinate in the language, thought Agastya, you're really fluent. On the far side of the desk stood a trembling black suppliant, weeping fresh tears as though he had just been beaten. The other old man being shouted at turned out to be the district supply officer. Later, Agastya would conclude that they all looked the same, the denizens of the collectorate, aging with soft faces that hadn't seen much sunlight. They all wore pale shirts and loose pants. Their shirt pockets bulged outrageously with pens and spectacle cases. Most smelled nice, of some very Indian perfume or scented hair oil or pan. They could withstand, like placid buffalo, anything that an industrious superior could shriek at them. The district supply officer's face shone gently in the volley from the collector. Lambent dullness, Agastya remembered abruptly. Now where was that? Suddenly he was back in his college, English class 3 years ago, with Absalom and Achitophel open in front of him. Stoned and watching the new female teacher perform, nervousness had made her aggressive. Narsimahan, beside him, also stoned, had asked her some stupid question. Your question doesn't make any sense, she had said, arching her back. There had been giggles from the gigglers. Narsiman had laboriously scrawled a long note on his Dryden and passed it to him. August, tell her. Yes, my lovely bitch, when my hands are full with your flat buttocks, my mouth on either breast, I shall give you the lust gnaws between your Absalom and Achitophel. His laugh had even woken up the back row. He had been sent out. The supply officer wiped his forehead with a many-colored handkerchief. Yes, lambent dullness, definitely. That he could relate a phrase from an 18th century English poet to this, a sweating supply officer in a collector's office in Madna, made him smile. The collector paused for breath, said, Hello, you've got to get used to this. An administrator's job is not easy, and returned to bringing the supply officer's sweating head off. The shrieking stopped after a while and the supply officer left. At the door, he again used his many-colored handkerchief. The weeping man left too, after many namastes and 2 half prostrations, forehead touching the collector's desk. Shrivastava smiled at Agastya. His sideburns were like right-angled triangles, the hypotenuses of which looked like the shadows of his cheekbones. So, Agastya, what kind of name is Agastya by? When you were in your mother's lap, you ignoramus, he said silently, drooling and piddling, didn't she make your head spin into sleep with the verses of some venerable Hindu epic? Agastya is Sanskrit, he wanted to say, for one who shits only 1/3 every morning. But the collector didn't really want any answer. Staccato conversation while he rushed through his files. Someone was there to pick you up yesterday at the station? Yes, sir. How's the room at the rest house? Lots of mosquitoes, sir. The collector threw every finished file on the ground. They landed depending on their weight with dull thumbs or sharp claps. Thus he eroded the mountains on his desk, and the files lay like corpses in a battlefield, perhaps giving him the illusion that he was victorious. Oh, mosquitoes, yes, I can see that from your face. A quick side glance at him. I tell you, Madna must be one of the unhealthiest places in India. Hot, humid, disease, everything. Are you boiling your water? I told the Naib Tehsildar to tell you. Thanks for that, sir, but I'm not quite sure whether the cook at the rest house here understood yesterday what boiling means. Yes, you'll face the problem of language in Madna. They can't even speak Hindi properly. He rang the bell. Get some tea. He suddenly leaned back and scowled. You see, in North India and Bengal and other places, everyone can follow Hindi. Agastya was a little disconcerted by his collector's scowls. Later, he saw that that was his official face. At home, too, that face occasionally dawned, but only for office work or when his wife or children behaved like his subordinates. And now everything from the state government comes in the regional language. They think this will increase administrative efficiency. He wiped his face and forearms with a yellow hand towel. Rubbish. These fellows. He scowled at Joshi. Joshi Sab, arrange for some kind of language tutor for Mr. Sen, and later you must subscribe to a vernacular newspaper. That'll also help, but not the Dainik that just publishes nonsense. Joshi took notes, pen poised to record anything that the collector might disgorge. Joshi's pad seemed to irritate Shrivastava. It obliged him to emit noteworthy sentences. He rang the bell. Chidambaram, get Mr. Sen, the district gazetteer. Sir, may I have a look at the map? Yes, please, while I finish some of this. Agastya left his chair for the huge district map on the wall behind Shrivastava. For the first few minutes, nothing made sense. He finally located Madna town. God, the district was huge. The southern bit seemed heavily forested. That would be a good area to visit. Shrivastava's voice penetrated intermittently. I want to suspend this supply officer bugger. That corrupt cement dealer in Pincheri, Taluka, has again been passing off bloody sand as cement, and this supply officer can't haul him up because he's getting his cut too. Agastya contemplated the improbable that soon, in a few months, he would be mouthing similar incomprehensibilities and acting appropriately. Chidambaram touched his elbow with a huge black book. He returned to his chair with the Madna District Gazetteer. Don't read that now. Take it back with you. It's wonderful reading. Agastya opened it. It's ancient, sir. It hasn't been updated since 1935. Shrivastava scowled. Who has the time? Either you work or you write a history. Those fellows never worked. He picked up his cup. You'll soon see how the people here drink tea. Always from the saucer. Look. They watched the smiling Joshi pour his tea into his saucer. Tastes better this way, Joshi said. Shrivastava, it seemed, had a lot to say to his protege. He just didn't know where to begin and bounced from one topic to another. You have a copy of your training program. For the last 2 months, you'll be block development officer, and before that, you'll be attached to various district offices. The first 3 weeks in is with the collectorate, and this first week, you sit with me and try to grasp the work of the collector. After all, in a few months, you'll be assistant collector, doing in a subdivision what I do at the district level. Sir, there's an integration gathering at the Gandhi Hall at 12:15. We'll go for that. Integration as in national integration? Yes, but here it's called something else, of course. Shrivastava rang the bell and said something to the peon. Joshi left. You just see how many people come to meet the collector every day, like they'll meet you when you're block development officer later, scowled Shrivastava at Agastya, and then at the villagers whom the peon had just ushered in. Reverentially, they unfolded and handed Shrivastava a sheet of paper. Its black creases seemed to mark its tortoise journey, slipping off the hands of one unhelpful official into another's. A conversation ensued, Shrivastava scowling less as he understood more, the voices of the villagers slowly gaining in confidence. Then while Shrivastava scribbled, the villagers waited, patient and passive. strong hands bent suppliantly. They had brought in a smell of sweat and the earth, but they weren't, thought Augustia, irrelevantly, with a vacuous half smile, remotely sexy, just sad, and then he felt vaguely guilty. Two of them looked at him now and again. He didn't fit into the collectorate. The visitors came all day. Augustia could eventually categorize them. Indeed, that was all he could do since the conversations were beyond him. The petitioners always stood. Shrivistav asked them to sit only if it seemed that they would take long. If they sat, it was on the edge of the chair. The variety of complaints from the little that Augustia grasped through instinct, gestures, and the occasional telltale Hindi or English phrase was bewildering, and the area of action spread over a district of 17,000 square kilometers. So the first paragraph of the gazetteer had said, someone had encroached on the petitioner's land, and the petitioner had received no help from the tehsildar. The police patrol in a village had connived at a murder, and the entire police hierarchy seemed to be backing him up. Laborers on daily wages at some roadside complained that the contractor paid them irregularly. A naive tehsildar somewhere seemed to be harassing a tribal's wife. A dealer in some village always adulterated his kerosene. Initially, Augustia was impressed by the solidity and confidence in Shrivistav's reactions. He seemed to know exactly what to do in each case. A few visitors after, he changed his view and thought, marveling at the sideburns, that Shrivistav ought to be confident because he had been dealing with such matters for years. The petitioners partially explained the crowds outside the collectorate. But there were others too, subordinate officers from various offices who were summoned or came to report and didn't sit until asked to. And then there were the gossips of the district who were the most gluttonous about time, but whom Shrivistav could not alienate because they knew the pulse of Madna and were also the politicians' groupies. Sycophants to the last, they wheeled like caricatures. Still others brought invitations. They would be honored if the collector and Mrs. Collector, and later in the year some included Augustia, Sensab, IAS, and Afterthought in ink, graced with their presence the sports day of their school or the function to celebrate the 80th birthday of some veteran freedom fighter of the district who had perhaps had the overwhelming good fortune to have been jailed once with Gandhi. Only a very few visitors breezed in before their names could precede them on slips of paper. The Member of Parliament from Madna and two red-eyed members of the Legislative Assembly. Augustia enjoyed his long, speculative categorization and placed at the apex the very select few for whom Shrivistav moved forward in his chair to shake hands and to whom he offered tea. There were only two that day, the MP and the managing director of the paper mills somewhere in the district. On the wall behind him hung a big teak board with the names of the district magistrates of Madna since 1902. The earlier collectors had been British. One, Avery, had been collector for 6 years, 1917 to 1923. He felt hungry, and to dispel the pangs, thought of the horrors Bazant would feed him at lunch. At 12:45, the collector told the peon, "I'll meet the others when I return. Get the driver." Outside in the corridor, the peons, the petitioners, the politicians' groupies, and their groupies all stiffened and shut their babble when they saw Shrivistav. They looked solemn and guilty, as though they'd been planning to strip him, thought Augustia. The heat was terrible. The car began a slow furrow through the mass on the road. This car has an emergency siren apart from the light. I've always wanted to use both together just to get to my office. They passed the wild cannabis and the pond. Children jumped from one buffalo to another. When it rains, the cattle camp in the corridors of the collectorate. The same thing used to happen in Azmanji, where I come from. Earlier, I used to think that a collectorate with cows and stray dogs in its corridors could only be found in Azmaganj. Now I think it's a common story. A man poked his head in through the front window to gaze blankly at them. The driver snarled at him. You're from a city. This place will initially seem very different. Then you'll get used to it. Someone thumped the back of the car in affection and boredom. Shrivastava watched Agastya sweat. If you think it's hot, you should be here in May. The old residents say that on some afternoons in May, even birds have dropped from the sky, dead. The car turned reckless as it left the field of offices. And this integration meeting? Oh, there was a big riot here a few months ago. Hindu Muslim. It surprised everyone because Madna has never been communally sensitive. The last collector, Anthony, was transferred, I think, because of the riots. They said he'd bungled there, but more like the politicians who were actually behind the riots just wanted a scapegoat. These politician bastards, you'll really know what they're like when you're block development officer. So we formed an integration committee. It meets once a month. Both Hindu and Muslim gundas get together and eat and waste time. Have as little of the food as possible. It'll be poisonous. The brown curtains of the car couldn't keep out the town. Narrow streets and two-storied shacks, people and animals immune to the heat. Shrivastava perhaps sensed Agastya's mood and said, the population of the town is only 2 lakhs. Sometimes I think the development of Madna must be representative Indian story. Once it was just another district, very rich forests, and made to feel proud of its tribal traditions, which is another way of trying to make you forget your economic backwardness. Then they found coal here, mica, limestone, one of the country's richest industrial belts. Now oil too. Factories soon surrounded this town. New ones come up almost every day. The car screeched its rage at the cyclist who cut across and darted down a side alley the width, or so it seemed, of a writing table. Development is a tricky business. There must be something wrong with development if it creates places like Madna. But priorities is the problem. How are we to spend our money? Will it be on coal and oil, or town planning, or forests? And pressure of time. There is never enough time. But you'll see another facet of development when you're BDO, the insane race to meet targets. Shrivastava talked on with eyes half closed, never looking at Agastya, as though he was speaking to a cassette recorder. This bequeathing of wisdom was surprising, especially on first encounter, but the pattern was frequently repeated with Shrivastava and with the superintendent of police. Sharing the back seat of a car with a novice in administration, the senior officers always theorized, attempted to explain, to impress, to tutor, to justify. The car was continually being trapped by cycles and rickshaws, which seemed to behave like outriders who had suddenly decided to have some fun with the limousine. He saw snatches of other lives, veined hands on bicycle handlebars, and behind them a man emptying a bucket into a drain, the tense calves of a rickshawwala, sweat-wet shirts around a stall selling fruit juice. But in the months that followed, he saw very little of the real Madna, the lives of its traders in wood and forest produce, the coal miners, the workers at the paper mills, the shopkeepers, the owners of cinema halls and restaurants. The district life that he lived and saw was the official life, common to all districts, deadly dull. This world comprised collectors, district development officers, superintendents of police and their legionary subordinates, many wielders of petty power, sullen or resigned if posted away from home and buying furniture cheap and bidding time till transferred to a congenial place. Gandhi Hall stood beside the city police station, a 3-storied building. For a moment he thought that it had been bombed, something out of a TV news clip on Beirut, broken window panes, old walls, an uncertain air, a kind of wonder at not having collapsed yet, a red banner over the door, and outside, a statue of a short, fat, spectacled man with a rod coming out of his arse. He asked in wonder, "Is that a statue of Gandhi?" Shrivastava laughed shrilly. "Yes, who do you think?" "Phew, what's the rod, sir?" Shrivastava laughed even more. "That's to prop up the statue. It fell off a few weeks after it was installed. Madna will have many more surprises then." Then the Gundas were upon them. They enveloped